What's up, Badger Nation? How goes it? Waiting for John to jump on here, and we'll get started. Well, I might as well talk a little bit about the last month. I think we had a Sett Session. It's been pretty intense month for the United. Yes.
Whoa.
What's up, buddy?
How you doing?
Good. We're just live here to the Badger Nation as we speak.
Wow, just dropped right in.
Right into the mix.
I gotta get you some swag, man. I can't be the only one rocking swag, and no one else is rocking swag.
Well, no one's got Badger swag.
I got some Badger swag. Here. I got some Badger swag right here.
Wow, there you go. Yeah, I think
It's exclusive though.
Everyone needs Badger swag. That should be I think that should be something we should push for this month. I know a lot of people talked about it early about getting some swag going.
There's interesting enough, there's a community member, a very active Badger that runs a pretty popular merchandise business that works with a bunch of celebrities and things along those lines. They're really interested in doing a merch line with Badger. And I think they're going to propose something next week. Interesting enough, so we might see something on the forums.
Sweet. Yeah, I've been talking to Meta Factory about possible cool stuff to do there as well. So yeah, anyone that wants to weigh in on apparel stuff, hop in the chat, track us down. I feel like I don't have enough swag. I feel like I've earned it at this point.
So let's get rocking and rolling. So I feel like, John, it's been maybe 3 or 4 weeks in that range since the last time we did this. But the last time it was the first time, so we kind of went over everything. I think it's good to go over, as we discussed prior to this, kind of what's happened since, and then what the plan is moving forward. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it works great. I think most of that will cover a lot of the topics we saw listed, responded in Twitter. And, like I said, that first one was just like a whole big thing. So, yeah, let's hit what we've done since then, what we've got coming up, and hopefully it'll be a little more succinct and we can, keep cranking these things out.
Yeah, and then throughout this conversation, anybody that's watching on Twitter or whatever, just put the questions up in the Periscope feed here, and we'll just try our best to answer them on the spot, which is pretty cool. But if it's been a month, everything's a blur. But if it's been a month, there's a lot that's happened since the last time we chatted. I think obviously the biggest things were, we pushed towards a V2, which we launched, I guess, a couple weeks ago. And that was a big initiative internally. And what's really interesting, John, is as we continue to bring products to market and make iterations, the collective and the active participants that are involved just continues to kind of grow with it and self-organize to an extent. Now, I think we can both agree, there's going to be some improvements from an organizational standpoint, but, it's just been really cool to see as we kind of put these poles in the ground and say, okay, V2 is what we're pushing forward, and Dig is what we're pushing forward towards. And now we're pushing forward towards this, borrow against your vault positions. All of a sudden, the community just kind of comes together and starts collaborating. Like, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, we've picked up a lot more folks that seem to be contributing consistently, which is great. And like I said, we had to, coming out of the gate, it was, okay, let's get the sets live, let's get the product live, get some TVL in there, get some fees flowing through. Then Dig, was part of the initial, vision as well. But then we're finally to the point now, okay, Dig's out. I know there's still, and we'll, I guess, touch on what exactly we're focusing on right now. If not everything's perfect, but going forward, it's like, all right, well, now it's more where the community's kind of taking the reins and seeing where we go from here. So, yeah, it's been great to get a lot of feedback on the different directions we should go, how we should get there. And then a lot of the focus has been, all right, well, how do we, use all of this collective, brain power and energy to actually do something positive, which, has its own challenges.
Yeah, totally. Well, one thing to point out is behind me on the board, we got two brothers in arms here. We got Bitcoin and Dig together, ready to battle. I don't know if you've seen this, John, but I had to put it up there for everyone.
Yeah, the peg is flirting right now. I think we might rebase while we're on the stream.
I think so. It'd be really
It's
interesting.
unclear if it'll be positive or negative.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, so let's go over what's happened since the last set session. So, the key things, we obviously had a lot of growth on the team. I feel like there was a lot more attention from the greater market around what Badger's up to. But now from a product standpoint and from a development standpoint, we brought V2 out, and that was huge for us because V1 was really focused on the Vault product. And as the vision started to mature and the community really started to provide that type of insight and suggestion and feedback, it became clear that we wanted to become the one-stop shop for all things Bitcoin. And to have that in V1, it wouldn't make sense, right? And it wasn't the best user experience. It was good for what it was, but to have to put it in the set, go to another page, stay, go to this other thing, it was a little bit confusing. And then of course, we had some, it took a while to load and things like that. So we pretty much did a full overhaul of our front end infrastructure, made a lot of improvements, and shout out to Panda Badger. He leads the front end initiative, and Mitch as well, who was extremely involved. And I was just ecstatic with how that went, right? How we actually went to market with it, the feedback from the community, and obviously a couple bumps here and there. But for the most part, I feel like the feedback was really positive.
Yeah, I think the V2 UI was big improvement, and that, when people were asking when dig, that was kind of a lot of the, not necessarily hold up, but something that we thought was important to get to tackle before we got dig live. And then I guess to touch on kind of, the immediate post dig drop, the big focus right now is like we are aware that some of the APYs aren't always consistent showing on the front end. Everything's been distributed, I believe, appropriately. But
let's talk about that, John. That's important. Because a lot of people ask that question. So the main discrepancy here is that majority of people, I don't even know what the percentage is, but it's high, have been staking in the vaults since the beginning. And with that being the case, there's these multipliers that are built into the product today. And these multipliers are time-based. The longer you stake, the higher the multiplier you get, with a max of a 3x multiplier, which would have spanned over 8 weeks. So anyone that started in the beginning and hasn't withdrawn, they're going to be almost at that 3x multiplier, which is more resemblant of the APYs right now. And we're obviously actively working to make them a little more clear for people that are just coming in, because we're seeing an influx of new depositors quite consistently. I feel like the number of active users, based on some data that I was digesting from DApp Radar, it's gone up 3x in the last 30 days. It's almost 1,500 daily active users, which is pretty great. But people need to understand that. Now, what's also important to point out, and John, you'll be able to speak to this because you constructed this model for the most part, or led the construction of it, is as we come to next week, February 3rd would mark those 8 weeks. We're at a point now where the initial multiplier program will be complete. And we're looking to transition to this Badger Boost multiplier program that was passed through governance, I think, a week and a half ago. And with that, then everyone, there'll be a point of bringing previous multipliers in and, given a 60-day trail or whatever the community ends up deciding. But for the most part, we're going to almost have this refresh of a multiplier system. And I think that's going to put a level set across the APYs.
Yeah, and a lot of it comes down to the visualization components. I think that's what we're kind of getting at, is how do you, when you have more complicated stuff on the back end, how do you make it clear when people are coming in what they should expect? The emissions are changing week to week right now, and that's something that we've been working on a lot, is putting together more of a model for emissions rather than, the first couple weeks it was like, all right, well, we're sending this amount to this to each set, and it is what it is. Total amount we're emitting, we're going to split it up by these percentages. Once you add more sets and more products, like, you need more of a model. So that's something that passed through governance as well, is how we're going to manage that going forward. And like I said, I think one of the big focuses that'll start next week, and hopefully we can get it turned around pretty quickly, is the kind of an overhaul of how emissions and rewards are distributed. A couple components to that, and what we're part of our organizational process right now is just figuring out, okay, what do we tackle first? What's a priority? And I think the multiplier is probably the top priority, right up there with doing peg-based rewards for distributing dig to different sets based on where it is in the peg to be kind of our first stabilization mechanism. But that's something that hopefully we'll have some information to share forward as far as, getting information back to the community post vote as far as, okay, well, when is it? Okay, great. We voted yay. Like, yes, let's do this. Like, when is it actually going to happen? Right. So, the emissions will be focusing on that with the multiplier, peg-based rewards, and then the new emission schedule, stretching it out for, I think, another 14 weeks post. Yeah, for V2. So that's
22, John.
22 extra weeks or 22 total weeks?
22 weeks as of dig launch. So 21 weeks now.
Yeah. Okay. As of yeah. So 14 extra, I guess, on top of the 8 or.
Oh, my
13.
bad.
Yeah, roughly, whatever. Extending it out, and now we consider that more of like a runway to where we can then we'll continue to track our revenue during that time and work in where we're going to do like revenue-based rewards, with the goal of eventually being like cash flow positive and actually be able to sustain rewards long term. But it gives us a much longer runway to do that. But long story short, the emissions, I think, is our focus, alongside the stabilization mechanisms for, I consider stabilization not just stabilizing the app itself, but stabilizing, people's behavior with it. So making the APIs and the descriptions more clear, making sure there's better information out there about what everything on the site means. And then, we still have work to do on the dig dashboard. I think some updates were just pushed, so it's looking a little better. But I think
from a perspective, it's going to walk everyone through what that process was. So it's like, okay, we pushed towards V2, got V2 there. That was great. Some good improvements. In the background, quite a few community members like Poe and Mason and yourself and DeFi Frog got together and started tackling kind of like the big overarching governance decisions that were looming, which were, we can't continue distributing Badger like we have. We need to build a more digestible emissions model that lasts in a period of time, and this would be a dual emissions model with dig. So that was kind of a priority. Another thing was, okay, we want to look at how do we use the reward system to help with stability on dig once that launches. So that was also a priority. And then just understanding what we're going to do around the treasury and things along those lines moving forward. So that was kind of happening in tandem with V2. And just if people don't know, because I know you said it, John, but just so people can understand this, with the new emissions model, which has 21 weeks left from today, it's dual emissions, so it's Badger and dig. But the amount of Badger that's being distributed is 1/3 of what it was before dig came. The APYs are the same because it's being made up for with dig distribution, but the amount of Badger going into the market every week as a reward emission is 1/3 of what it was. And then on average, about 10% each week for the next 21 weeks. Both emissions are going to go down slightly to the point where, that's where this current emissions model ends. Now, to your point, I think it's in the best interest of the users and of the app during that time frame, we build a more robust strategy that allows for us to be use those cash flows more effectively to distribute APY. Like I think, we played around with even some of the numbers with, we've had almost $2 million in profits since we launched 60 days ago. And if we were to take that and even distribute 40% of it or 30% of it to the stakers in the B Badger vault, right there is like a 20% APY, something along those lines, or like a 15% APY, which is decent, right? Like it's not 200%, but like just to put it in perspective, there's a lot of stuff we can do with that, and I think that's going to be part of the strategy for consistency. So we got through those things, great, and then it was all heads down, focused on dig, and dig was a product of not just bringing a new token to market, but also developing 3 new vaults and running those through the security processes to make sure they were ready for the market and preparing the airdrop. And I love to talk about the airdrop because I'm really proud of it. And you should be too, because you were the lead of that airdrop. But I still can't get over how much of the airdrop was put back into the application, right? Like that part for me just screams success because of the actions that the community took, which shows the faith in the protocol, the long-term mindset of the people that are participating with this. But I think that's a good place to start. Like when you were thinking about the airdrop and putting a structure together and a formula, like what were you thinking about there?
I think largely it was, the community. We just kind of kicked it off with some rough ideas for how to do the drop, and there's been a lot of airdrops, that have been done that gave us things to look at as far as how we want to distribute it. And I think the difference is, we want people involved with the protocol. You need money involved with the protocol, but you want people involved with the protocol too. And you don't want to be discriminatory to either one of the parties, whether you're someone who wants to participate that has a small amount of money and someone that wants to participate that has a large amount of money. So you don't want to, aggressively disenfranchise any one of those parties. And then you also have to consider Sybil attacks. So you can't just make it so that, a whale can split up their money across 1,000 addresses and just kind of milk the whole thing. So that was kind of the framework, and then had some good feedback from the community just in general, just in the forum for, which things they liked and didn't like. I think they liked distributing based on the route. They liked the stake days ratio once it was kind of explained as being an indication of your commitment or just how much you've been using the protocol. And then it just really came down to grinding it out with, I don't even know if Mr. Poe was, I don't think he was really part of even the quote unquote team once those initial kind of posts came out, but then, brought him into the chat, and then, a lot of just iteration on it until we, a lot of it's feel, like, does this feel right? So let's get the data in there. Let's do a couple test runs and see how it shakes out. Like, what are the top addresses getting? What are the top addresses that don't stake at all getting? What are the the bottom addresses getting? What are the bottom addresses that stake a lot getting? And does that kind of feel right? So, I think that was mainly what we went, what kind of drove a lot of it. And then that was what drove getting the actual framework together. And then we used the forum to get the input from the community on the actual parameters. And I think,
and another thing to point out there, right, John, is we announced it beforehand, which is almost blasphemy in our world, right? Like, no one really does that. No one says beforehand, because there's a lot of people that supposedly want to milk it. But that was part of the strategy. We wanted to give people an opportunity to get involved, and we felt confident in the infrastructure and framework that we had, that it wouldn't be gamed. But we also were able to capture the attention of these people as users, and a lot of them stuck around, right? Like, they came in, they got involved as part of the overarching nature of the community that we have and the users that participate in our product. If you're going to be getting Badger and putting it in, and you would have came through kind of this funnel, there's a high likelihood that you also are comfortable using tokenized Bitcoin. So we saw this big influx of people getting Badger, more Badger wallets going up. I think it's tripled in the last 15 days. But nonetheless, all these people coming in, but then those people saying, okay, I've been here for a few days. This is a good experience. I like this. The APY is pretty good here. Let me take some tokenized Bitcoin that I have, put it into Curve, put it into Sushi, maybe LP with Badger, and put it into the app. So we started to see the TVL grow, and at the same time, Bitcoin was going down. But the TVL was growing. So what that was saying was that we were getting that much more deposits, since we weren't relying on the price of Bitcoin to show up, to resemble a higher TVL. It was actually going down and TVL was going up. And then you look at a position now where Bitcoin's starting to climb again. In the last 24 hours, our TVL has grown by almost 175 million, just because Bitcoin, went up 15%, right? But to that point, I couldn't be more excited about how that airdrop went. The launch was relatively smooth, I'd say. I think the team was really happy with it. But 91.8% last time I dug into the numbers, either provided LP on Uniswap or SushiSwap and deposited those LP tokens in the vault, or just put the dig straight in the vault. And that's important. Like, it's a vanity number, it's cool, but why it's important is because of the stability strategies that we're going to be putting forward on dig and in the dig vault. Because we've made this very clear beforehand, why we think we can maintain PEG with the rebasing model that we have, at least our first up to bat with it, is the fact that we have the vaults. And with automated strategies, we feel if enough of the supply is in the vault, we will have a major impact on the markets from a buy and sell standpoint, which is really the entire foundation of the DIG token mechanics, right? The supply expands, people sell, supply comes down. But on other rebasing assets previously, the buy pressure really wasn't sufficient. Oh, there's a new farm that's accepting this coin. People put their token in there. The price goes up. Everyone's buying. But there's really no consistent demand because there's no utility for it. So if we can use these vaults as a way to drive that buy pressure as well in an automated fashion, the user doesn't really care about it or doesn't really need to do anything, and they can see their DIG grow, it stays slightly above the price of Bitcoin and slowly expands and stays in that peg. Now I'm kind of making it sound easier than it actually is, but you know, that's a beautiful thing, and that's how I see the long-term viability of DIG as you know, a non-custodial Bitcoin on Ethereum. But it's really it came down to how much of the DIG in the supply, circulating supply, will go in the vault, and so much has gone in there. That just gives us that much more of an opportunity as we bring these stability strategies to the market to have success with them.
Yeah, so I guess we could do a quick, looking forward with DIG specifically roadmap. So I think, you know, it's not an easy thing. None of these algorithmic stable coins have proven success yet in the market. So we're not assuming it's going to be easy. So we have DIG out, step one, having some sets in the liquidity. Definitely important next step. So as you mentioned, the next thing that we're focusing on is two areas. One is the peg-based emissions, which will be kind of give it a slight nudge. You know, if it's above the peg, more of the DIG emissions will go to the Bitcoin sets, which would be great. Maybe attract more Bitcoin, more fees. But then we're assuming that Bitcoin depositors are more natural sellers of DIG. And then if it's below the peg, then more of the DIG goes to the DIG sets. So there'll be more LP, it'll build up more automated liquidity. There'll be more incentive to stake your DIG, because while you might be getting a negative rebase, you're getting more emissions in those sets. So that's like a nice nudge things in the right direction. And then we've got a strong focus right now on what we want to do as far as a stability set. There are a few, basically just high level, when it's above the peg, it'll be selling DIG for WBTC. When it's below the peg, it'll be buying DIG with WBTC. How exactly that happens, if it's in some balance, like in some pool, if it's two different balances, what the actual mechanics are behind it, that's all getting kind of worked out now. And there will be, you know, I think, you know, internally we're trying to figure out a couple models that we think will work, and then speak with the developers, see if it's feasible, and then bring them to the community for you know, feedback and for people to weigh in on it, and then get you know, eventually make a choice of which one we want to build. And I think the intention is whichever one that is, it will be not just the community depositing into it, but we'll look to put some of the DIG and the treasury into it as well. So that should hopefully be something that's more of a stronger push back towards the peg. And then there's still
that's key, right, John? Like there's 40% of the entire supply in the treasury, and being able to leverage that to help with the peg is a pretty big thing.
Yeah, and then you know, and we're not saying that's it. So you know, we're still keeping an eye on other algorithmic stable coins coming out. What Frax is doing is interesting with something like partial collateralization, which you can say whether or not you think that's a good thing to actually have partial collateralization. Fei protocol is doing some interesting thing with like protocol controlled value. I don't think they've even launched yet. But they're launching soon. So very interesting opportunity to see some mechanics in the wild, and then see if that's something that we could leverage for our own sets.
And that's an opportunity, John. Use that as an opportunity to just say, right, to all these great projects that are working on algorithmic stable coins and have different models, like come to the Badger community, come collaborate with us, right? Like, you know, if you're doing it around stable coins and you aren't focused around Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency assets on Ethereum, like, you know, come work with us and let's figure something really cool out, right? Like that's the whole point. That's the whole point of Badger. It's not, you know, a few people in a room working on some stuff and bringing these things to life. It's how do we be the environment for all the best
builders in the space are doing different things.
Live streaming.
I see live streaming has stopped. Right, you hear that?
Yes, it stopped with YouTube. It should still be on Twitter.
Okay, good.
I don't know why it
Yeah,
stopped.
just trying to. There is a little complaining of, I think, feedback on your mic. I don't know if you have your mic settings. We're trying to the volume down.
Mine's turned off now. That was creating a reverb earlier, but we turned it off.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Is it better now? We're doing it on the screen, so I don't know if it'll be a
It's a little better.
immediate response.
Keep going.
Alright, cool. Keep on. It's the thing for you guys said. I mean, we're collaborating with projects all over the place. If we don't reach out to you, come reach out to us, and we're more than happy to figure out interesting ways to collaborate. Like no one knows how these things are going to work, so let's figure it out together.
Mm-hmm. So that's big, and I think that's a good segue. So with some stats around it, just to kind of close that loop. We're on day 7 today. We've had 6 consecutive positive rebases. There's been, I think there's anywhere between 2,500 and 3,000 holders of bid at this point. Quite decent liquidity and volume. I think it's anywhere between 15 and 20 million on each Uniswap and SushiSwap. And then of course we already have composability with BDIG available. And I think that's something we quickly overlooked here, but in general, that's another push for us is big, is how do we get BDIG integrated in a bunch of places, DeFi protocols and the like. And that's going to be really the focus moving forward along this journey.
Yeah, so I guess do you want to go new products or operations stuff?
Well, it's segue into new products, John. The reason why I say that is because we talked about how we collaborate with people. How do we collaborate with different people and different projects and things along those lines, right? So with that's really the premise here. So we've talked about quite a few products, right? We've talked about the ability for people to deposit native Bitcoin and mint RenBTC or WBTC. And you can almost envision these as different tabs in the app. But we talked about that. We've talked about the ability to go into the vault with one click, call it a Zap, from ETH or USDC or any tokenized Bitcoin right into the vault. Any of the vaults, including Big Vault and anything that we have. We've talked about, obviously, the ability to borrow against your vault positions in collaboration with UMA and creating synthetic stablecoins. And then finally, we've also talked about this interest-bearing Bitcoin that's backed by an index of our 4 curve vaults, curve BTC vaults. And what's important to point out there is all 4 of those projects are projects in collaborations with other teams. The RenBTC one is, obviously leveraging the Ren VM, but a team formed from the Ren community that came forward and is actually building it and working with the Ren team on just verifying that build. But they're going to share in the percentage of all the revenue that comes from that. They're going to be earning from the developer mining pool that's based on the amount of revenue that product brings to the DAO. Same thing with the Zap product. We've been collaborating with the Zapper team on that. And then I obviously talked about the collaboration with Kuma. And then that's the premise here. Is that we couldn't go to market quickly or confidently from a security perspective if we're sitting here trying to build all this stuff from the ground up ourselves. That would be impossible. To be able to leverage a model to which we can collaborate with teams that have deep domain expertise in their own protocol, that is battle tested, that has had millions of dollars in the protocol, has been in the market for an extended period of time, has gone through extensive internal and external audits, but really hasn't had that focus on Bitcoin, but they want to be able to open up that side of the market. That's a great opportunity to collaborate with that,
Yeah, and all of those lean towards, we talk about sustainability. It's easy to drop a token and, open up some farms. It's been proven pretty hard to kind of stay relevant. And I think the key that all of this focused on is on stability, sustainability, and if we want to be the best place for people to bring their, Bitcoin to interact with DeFi, we need to have, good APY and good uses for those assets. So, the UMA protocol will be focused on making these assets productive, which means that, if you can use it to then take out a loan, you don't necessarily need as much APY for that to still be the best use of your money at that point. So like these, mechanisms.
It's utility, right? Then it's utility too, John. Like, call a spade a spade. We've been in the market 2 months. I'd argue for the first month, a lot of people just looked at Badger and say, hey, it's another farm with some good APY. And that's not what we are at all, right? Yes, we have good APY, and yes, we've used the ability to incentivize participation as a great bootstrapping activity. But when we start unlocking that value in Bitcoin LP positions, that's real utility. Like, there's a real reason why users would want to come to Badger to deposit and earn, and then pretty much like get paid to borrow against their positions. Like, the APY is going to be higher than the amount that it costs to borrow. Like, it's so even if it's not as high as it is today, it's going to be higher, and that's a utility in itself, right?
Yeah, and I think it all fits in also with what is the Badger token used for, and this is another big shift that we're going to have to make with the emissions. So the Badger boost, just I'll roll back a little bit just because I think it's relevant here, is there's a couple different components to it. One, we're going to make Badger no longer need to stake it. All emissions from Badger to Badger will just go into the Badger vault. You just hold B Badger, and that B Badger to Badger ratio just continually increases over time. What that does, though, it opens it up for you to then use B Badger in other use cases. So that'll be what we'll be using with UMA, where you can mint the claw token. That'll be a stable coin, basically a 2-month stable coin. We'll continue to iterate on that. But because we're moving staking, we're also going to, right now all of the emissions are based through geysers on staking. But we'll be moving the Badger Boost to come more fully off-chain, but we can then have a more flexible mechanism where we track, okay, we are going to approve different places where you can have your B Badger that are like, where we're collaborating or...
Like an example is Cream, right? We've got a really good sentiment with the proposal on Cream. So if B Badger is sitting on Cream, we would then need to track the people that deposited in that contract.
Yeah, so it's going to be some work, but we're working out, this is laying the groundwork for the processes so we can maintain a list of, okay, here are kind of the approved quote-unquote approved places where you can hold a Badger that we think are productive as a community, think are productive for your B Badger, for Badger itself as a whole. If you're holding that spot, then it counts towards your stake ratio. So that is your numerator, just how much Badger you have in these different places, whether it's Badger or Badger LP. And then the denominator for that is how much of the non-Badger assets that you're staking, just generally the Bitcoin. You might even get dig into the part as far as the ratio. So the Badger boost is purely just based on how much Badger you're staking relative to the amount of Bitcoin that you're staking. And staking is relative to productive use of Badger, how much Badger you're holding, using in Cream, using in UMA, etc. The more you do of that, the higher APY you're going to get on your Bitcoin. And that's evens the playing field because it's easier for a small fish to get 2x the value of their Bitcoin in Badger. If someone has $10 million in Bitcoin wants to go get 2x the value in Badger, that's pretty hard to do. They're not doing better. It's easier these days. But that's the key. That makes Badger more productive. You can use it for things. We're not stopping you from using it, but then it also has some baseline utility of giving you better returns on your Bitcoin. We feel like that just continues to give the Badger to more people that are supporting Badger. It should coalesce the community and have bring more utility to the asset in general.
Yeah, totally. And with that, because that's an important factor, right? There needs to be incentives there for people to maintain their deposits for an extended period of time. And this way, it gives that composability aspect, because people can use their vault tokens wherever they please, and based on the community sentiment of where that token is, which contract those tokens are living on, then or deposited into, that will then come towards that, right? But I think in general that's really the turning point for Badger. Like as we work towards bringing this to market, I think that's that puts us in a position, that puts the application in a position to have real long-term sustainability with this DBL. And if we're able to create that stickiness, I think a lot of things will start to happen that we envisioned from the beginning. But it just takes time to get there. What I mean by that is like obviously we're completely community run and we're a collective of builders and build stuff, right? But when you can instill that trust and build that sustainability, more builders are going to want to spend their time there because they feel more confident that it's just not going to be something that comes and goes in a month. Like how many times have we seen a project? Oh, they have $500 million in their smart contract, and then like literally 3 days later, it's like they have $5 million. You know what I mean? Like that's just the nature of kind of how immature the market is today. But if we can solidify that utility, I think we're going to attract some pretty amazing people to build, and the community is just going to continue to grow and continue to bring really cool Bitcoin-oriented products to market.
Yeah, so I guess that's a decent transition for some of the kind of internal stuff, and you can bucket this into like reasons some other things might take a while to build, because we're also building kind of the whole operational people infrastructure. So not many specifics to share right now, but a lot of discussion internally about how we pay people. The people that are working for the protocol, they're full time now, so they should be compensated for the work. How do we align that with the protocol itself? We're not going to like put top down like management structure and reviews and yada yada yada. I think there's interesting models out there with what Sushi has done and other projects for handling more decentralized infrastructure, but still giving some people some confidence that you will continue to get paid, not just doing month to month. And the Carefree Pro just can't just be going in a spreadsheet and paying everyone specific amounts of money every month through a grant to get approved. There needs to be some sort of long-term component to it. So that's a big thing, obviously, that's a little tricky to figure out, but there should be more information on that coming out.
And then I think like that plays into the bigger picture, right? I've said this publicly a few times, and I'll say it again, right? Like having a decentralized organization with like people that are in all parts of the world doing different things with no real like time, we have to do this at this time. Everyone's operating freely. Some people are contributing even without compensation. Some people are contributing with compensation. People are working on all different projects and things. It's this open collective is a new frontier for how businesses operate. And with that comes all challenges around how do you organize it effectively. Payment and compensation is one piece of the bucket. But like even being able to have multiple products, maintenance on those products, innovation within those products, introducing new products, all the different factors that come into what each product brings to market, like emissions and this and that, like all these types of things. It involves some innovations around how you actually organize people. And that's something that we're learning as well. We have a lot of things to improve upon there because we've been able to push things to market. And I feel like a few people told me like, wow, you guys are moving real fast. And it's like, yeah, great. It doesn't feel like that on this side. I guess so. And it's like, we need to, and we are getting better at how we better structure and organize the people that are contributing. And that's just going to become that much more important as more and more people get involved, right?
Yeah, and I think the two things that the community would be probably most interested in, that they are a focus now, and hopefully we'll have, we just need to come up with some rough frameworks, try them and iterate, is, one, how do you get involved? If you want to actually join the team or do whatever, like what's the inflow for that? Right now it's like, DM so-and-so, DM DeFi fraud or whatever. That's obviously not a great flow, so figure out, okay, if you're interested, what do you do? Like, here's the page, and go see kind of how to get started, and whether you're a dev or community member, product person, artist, whatever. We can use people of all types to contribute. Here's kind of how you do that. Second thing, this is a big focus for me because we've got a lot of practice with this around a lot of the gig airdrop and other things. The emissions configurations like EPO and Frog and Mason, I think, have been kind of focusing mostly on this, is the flow of information from the community through governance to development and back, and kind of not being a bottleneck, to look far ahead in front, but like being able to know that the community isn't approving or proposing things that are completely impossible or completely misaligned with what we're working on, but then also that, okay, great, that came through, where is it in the roadmap? When is it going to actually be done? Is it going to be done based on the actual spec? So like those are two of like the big things, just from me being a community member first, that I think is generally opaque for a lot of projects, and I definitely want to make sure that we tackle it.
John, that's something that I want to bring up as well. So, we're trying to evolve that process in the field, right? That's what we're working diligently on. At the same time, if anyone's interested in anything, just literally getting involved, that could be as simple as providing feedback and suggestions and doing that in a way where it shows that you're not just monkeying around and throwing a sentence up. Like, you've actually spent time thinking about it. You're putting, unique thoughts forward with the intention of like getting sincere feedback from people that are associated in the community already. That's how you got involved. That's how Pro got involved. That's how Mitch got involved. That's how Paul got involved. That's how Mason got. The list is endless. The team was small in September when we first turned up the Discord. I was pretty much talking about some crazy shit, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, Bitcoin and DeFi, cool." And it's like all those decisions were made with people like yourself because of you're like, "Oh shit, this is really cool." And like this seems like, let me just give real feedback. It's the same way. But yeah, we're working on the processes. But in the end of the day, anyone from anywhere that wants to get involved, I can say, because it's happened. Like, it's not just like, oh, so come get involved and the team's gonna listen. It's like, no, time and time and time again. And John, you'll speak for it, right? I try and shepherd the community, but there's a lot of the times, I don't have the wherewithal to be able to dig deep in some of these things. And I'm just like, whatever you guys think, and then I'll dig into it, as it progresses and get some feedback here and there. But that's just how it is, right? We're not sitting here trying to dictate as a team, hey, this is how it needs to work, and hey, this. It's like, let's be as open as possible, as many contributors that actually give a shit, and they're actually, willing to work and do the commitment. And I can say, at least myself, as an advocate, that if people are putting in that time and effort, you have my support in ensuring that the Treasury puts grants forward, even retroactively or in the short term, for the effort that you did. A good example is VFAT and Jinpao, right? When we first started, we had issues with the front end. VFAT spinned up, that's when his website was really starting to take off. He spun that up. Jinpao spun up Sett Vision, and those things were huge for us because there was no front end for people to interact with, but the contracts were there, right? And we ensured that they received grants subsequently after, because you got to appreciate when people contribute in a real way. So I'd say that too, right, John?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever spoken verbally with Mr. Poe. We've had a lot of talk on chats, but there's definitely one where we were putting out proposals in the forum, and his spreadsheets just decimated mine.
Yeah.
All right.
I couldn't make spreadsheets if my life depended on it.
Yeah, so that he got in there, and he's been pretty critical in a lot of the components so far. I think just as we scale, it'll be obviously things get harder. When we first started, it was just yourself, kind of keeping an eye out for folks contributing, and you can do that. As we get bigger, it's harder to pick people out. So as we grow the team, just making sure that people know, hey, this person seems like they're really doing something.
It's really low now. No, it's like barely can hear you very well.
How about now?
That's good.
Yeah, so the tricky bit's going to be now, okay, we're growing the team, making sure the team's filtering things up, because, I'm not going to be writing every form proposal anymore. I mean, I'm not now, I never really was, but, there's kind of 3 or 4 of us that were doing most of the BIPs. There's going to be more people doing BIPs, making sure that the people that are, reading the comments on the BIPs are finding the great people, bringing good feedback, and like bringing them into the loop. And, we can't have every discussion with 50 people, but like, hey, let's, light up a small Telegram, Discord channel with a smaller group, sort it out. Man, this person really contributed really well here. Let's, bring them in.
It's 2:50 Eastern. I want to be diligent around time. We touched on a lot of things. I think one thing that I'd like to touch on, because it's been a conversation that's come up a lot, is around the governance and the DAO aspect of how our contracts and our treasury is controlled. I was on Clubhouse the other night with a few DeFi folks that DeFi Dad was kind of leading the conversation, and I just jumped in. It's literally like my first time on Clubhouse, but it was just a barrage of, why isn't there a time lock? Why isn't there this? Why isn't there that? I think it's important to address it. So, first and foremost, the structure that we have today, which I've been very public about, is a 3 of 5 multi-sig that's managed by the team, right? The development team. Obviously, through our actions, we've shown there's no malicious intent whatsoever. We've been completely transparent from the get-go, and that's our intention completely. At the same time, there is $1.2 billion inside of the application, right? And it doesn't make sense to maintain the structure the way it is. The reason it was like that, which was justified in my mind, at least in the team's mind, was that we needed the agility and speed. Because if there was a vulnerability, these contracts were very young and new, they still are, they're only 60 days old. We're bringing products to market consistently. We've introduced so many new smart contracts, even since launch, that we need the nimbleness to be able to respond accordingly. With the time lock, it prevents that. Because if there is a vulnerability, it's hard to actually patch that vulnerability if you have to wait 48 hours, right? So we wanted that speed and agility with the new contract. With that being said, we understand the importance of further decentralizing Badger, and the community can expect a proposal this weekend from the team on what that phased decentralization approach looks like. With that being said, adding additional adding additional signers to the multi-sig, making these signers public, having time locks on it, a staged time lock approach, having certain functionality, like almost like tiered multi-sigs, where one multi-sig has like the admin multi-sig, you want to call it the dev multi-sig, but then subsequent multi-sigs allow for the operations, right? Maybe allowing for pausing functionality on certain contracts, so if there is a vulnerability, you can at least stop the bleeding. And then that way, it's okay to wait for that, time lock while you patch it, because at least the bleeding is not happening consistently in an exploit type scenario. So we feel like with this stacked multi-sig approach, with different parameters and controls, it will enable us to continue operating the business in an agile way and being able to respond accordingly to different exploits, while giving users and user deposits more decentralization in the control of those assets and treasure.
Yeah, and be very clear about it from the get-go. I think that's what's most important, is people to know what they're getting into. If you don't feel comfortable with that, then you don't have to use it. I think most of us think that's sufficient given where we are right now, and there'll be a continual effort to improve, right? Like, see what works in the market. It's not something you want to just kind of play around with, but see what works and see what bubbles up, and if there's better solutions, and we'll go that route.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm excited for it, and I think it's a great step forward. I'd love for us to be able to make phase 1 transition next week if possible. Obviously, with community feedback, this would all go through the governance process, of course. But nonetheless, I'm excited to make those changes as well.
Great. I guess we'll grab, we threw out on Twitter as an AMA, but I think we covered most of everything. The one thing I think, with a couple minutes we have left here, was just around the clause, a little more explanation on, why it's, just a 2-month product and why, can you get liquidated, like what are the risks involved with the clause?
Yeah, so, first and foremost, this is our first foray into this synthetic market and using both positions for these specific things. So we can look at this as kind of like the first off the bat. And with that, we thought it made sense to ensure that we worked with and on and built this through a protocol that is battle tested in that regard. Today, and I've had a good relationship with Hart and Uma and a great experience with the Uma team for quite a while now. And today they have a perpetual product, so for people that don't know what that means, a product that doesn't have an expiry date. But that product, it's gone through audits, it's done its thing, but it hasn't been live in the market being used and having millions of dollars in it. Now, their fixed product has, and there's quite a few use cases for it already. And once again, as we mentioned earlier, we want to leverage partners with that domain expertise and an existing use case, but that hasn't been applied to, Bitcoin or Bitcoin vaults. And that's exactly what we're looking to do there. But it also ties into, and this is where I actually think it's a feature rather than a deterrent, but it actually ties into the other product that we've been thinking about for a long time, actually, which is this idea of limited edition vaults. So vaults that have a level of exclusivity on them, to which you would have needed to complete certain on-chain actions within the Badger ecosystem to even qualify to be the first one into the vaults. And by doing that, it starts us down this road of gamification, which John, you and I rapped about that a lot. But I'm super passionate about this intersection between gamification and DeFi, and obviously NFTs are a big part of that as well. But for the most part, it's just more around, and we've done this already, right? We've done this already with Dig and the Dig drop, and how we draw certain types of activities and participation based on an expected output and return from the users. It's a very similar thing. And if we start to build that expectation from the community, it also further solidifies why they should continue to stay in our app, because something else may be coming for them. And this is exactly the case with the cloud product and the subsequent vaults. And that's the other thing to point out, all these products that we're going to bring to market are going to be integrated with our vaults in some form of fashion, right? Like Big was and so forth. But nonetheless, this product and these vaults, things like people that have been staking or been holding VDig or VBadger the longest, people that hold our NFTs, people that have a certain stake day ratio based on some of the analyses that we pulled from the Big drop and then extending that further, right? These are the types of things that are going to continue to give people benefits as we introduce these new products. And I'm excited to see how the community responds to it. But I can say with the utmost certainty, there's 100% going to be a benefit to those that have been long-term participants within the Badger ecosystem for the Clause product or any of the products that are coming. So that's, and to speak to specifics, sorry, because I overlooked it a little bit, there's going to be a collateralization ratio. There has to be. Right? We're going to define that together within the community, but we're thinking of somewhere between 150 and 200% from a collateralization ratio. As it relates to clause, the whole mechanics of it, because it has an expiry date, people are either going to, just not give them back to get their collateral back, right? Which would be a process of them deciding to assume the loss because of maybe the return that they've gotten on those clause. But most people are going to, at the end of those 8 weeks, bring the clause back and get their collateral back, right? So that, that's how the buying and selling curve works. Is maybe a lot of people may take the clause, the non LP, and sell it for USDC in the beginning, but that comes back around as people are going to need to take that USDC, turn it into clause so they can get their collateral back, right? Yeah. It's really the process of it.
Yeah, and there's documentation, a couple other, been some other implementations of it with Uma. This is their product. We're just going to be, they're just approving us as a collateral asset for the product, and then we'll work to embed it into Badger, and then we'll have some steps around it. The reason it's a little different than just depositing at Aave or even at Maker, which is probably the most equivalent, there's no interest rate. It's a zero interest loan you're borrowing against your own collateral. That's why there needs to be an expiry date. It can't just go on in perpetuity. They are, I believe, working on a perpetual type product, but it's just, it's not out to the market yet. So for now, I think this is a great, way to kind of test the waters, and maybe it continues to be a thing if there's a good reaction to it. It will be, obviously wanting to be very open and blunt with people. Like if you have, $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, it's probably not going to be a great, or $1,000 worth of Badger, it's probably not going to be a great option for you because it's going to take gas to get, to deposit in bulk, to generate the claws, to then take those claws somewhere, swap them for USDC, take the USDC or DAI or whatever to go earn yield. But that's kind of the move, right? You're getting leverage on your V Badger or on your V Dig. There's just a lot of operations, a lot of gas. Gas is not cheap right now, so totally aware of it. But it's the mechanics that we're trying to work out now. And then just like we're looking into distributing B-Dig and B-Badger long term for the rewards. That's a gas saving mechanism. We'll continue as we find things that work for the protocol, look for gas saving mechanisms to kind of help the little guy as well. But you gotta get the mechanics right first.
Like removing the need to stake. That's around the corner too. That saves half the gas cost in getting in and out of Badger.
Yeah, exactly. No more staking. When you claim, you don't need to claim then stake. If you claim, you're already earning. You don't need to claim for this. But if you're staking Bitcoin, you're earning V Badger. So if you claim it, then you have V Badger. You don't need to go restake. You don't need to deposit and then stake. You're saving both those actions. So totally, hear everyone. Will be slow going, but it's test these things out, see if they work, and then if they do, then we want to make it more a critical component of the protocol, then we can work out a way to make it more efficient for everybody.
Well, John, anything else that you wanted to talk about? I feel pretty good around the hour that we spent in the Sett Session.
Yeah, I think that's good. The only other thing I had on my list to keep an eye out for in governance coming up is probably stuff around treasury management. There's already been a few things put out there. But we've got a bunch of assets in the treasury in different forms. So Mason's been kind of running a lot of the direction of that. A lot of people weighing in for kind of how we want to direct our assets going forward, whether it's diversifying what we can currently hold, what we do with incoming revenue, how we worked out the payment into that. But that would be something to keep an eye out for, hopefully pretty soon, to get more details for people to weigh in on and vote. And if you want to contribute to it, reach out.
Yeah, and then I'd also say, we have the meme honeypot coming up soon as well. We're iterating a bit on what the actual mechanics are of it right now, but for the most part, that will be one of the first use cases for B-Dig. Users will be able to use the B-Dig that they have, or B-Badger, to participate in the meme airdrop, in the meme honeypot activity. To put it in perspective, the first time we did it, there was hundreds of people that participated. Obviously, one lucky individual or wallet received enough Badger to equal Bitcoin at the time. I think Badger was $6 or $7 then. So that person, 100 grand plus. But nonetheless, it's more around, driving utility for these NFTs as well. I was just really impressed with, how those NFTs performed on the secondary market. 6 of the top 15 NFTs on Nifty rank were Badger NFTs with a cumulative market cap of over $1 million. Some of them selling for $25,000 a pop, which is really cool. And then, of course, how are we going to leverage those and the new sets of NFTs to give some type of benefit inside of the Badger system, if that's APY boosts, access to new products, things along those lines, as we relate back to this gamification idea, right?
Yeah, and we're talking to the meme team. The first one, it was predictable. It was going to be a whale race. Whale splits up across 6 wallets. It can farm, all the NFTs, and as soon as the last one available to be farmed was farmed, they can claim and do it. So it's still a game, but hard to participate if you're a little guy. And we're talking to the meme team, and they're totally down for some interesting mechanics this next time around to extend the game a bit. So using some of what we learned in the dig drop, some of those lessons and taking with them. So hopefully it should be something pretty cool, something new, and hopefully fun for everyone to participate.
Alrighty, well, Badgers, thanks for hanging out with us. It was great to just kind of share what's been going on behind the scenes a bit. I love doing these, John. I definitely want to do it again in a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. And I just want to say thanks to everybody just for their support, right? The community has just been unbelievable. I can't even imagine, the community to be at this size and have this level of passion 3 or 4 months ago. So it's pretty amazing, the level of involvement and participation. So love to see it keep going, love to see more people getting involved, like you said just a couple minutes ago, like anybody that wants to get involved doing anything, come do it. That's really just how it works. And we'll be there to welcome you. And that's it.
Great. Good talking to you.
You too, buddy.
Hey, everyone.